So Stanley, we're going to start firstly with the 25 quickfire questions under the Getting to Know Stanley Meadows. So let's start with question number 1. What is your full name given at birth?
Yes, it was my full name. I never had another name. Stanley Meadows, that was my name.
When is your birthday and the year of your birth?
14th of July, 1931. That is the same day as the French Revolution, Bastille Day. But of course it was a different year.
As a child, where were you born and raised?
I was born in the East End of London, in the borough of Stepney. And I was raised there, including the war years, until the age of, 14, where we moved to Bayswater. Slightly different.
If any, how many brothers or sisters did you have growing up?
One brother, 11 years younger than me, born in 1942, and alas, he died very young, at the age of 44. He was a frustrated actor. He wanted to be an actor like me, but the second best thing was being a barrister, and that's what he became.
What is your earliest memory of going to the cinema or the theatre?
The only escape from the misery of the East End in those days was the cinema, and we had something like 6 cinemas within walking distance. And my grandparents, my grandmother told me all about the silent films she'd seen and how she loved them, and my grandfather as well. And my mother started taking me to the cinema when I was about 4 years of age, and I loved it. I loved the cinema.
Growing up, did you have a favourite actor or actress whose work you really admired?
Well, growing up, of course, in the cinema, I loved James Cagney. I thought he was terrific. He was my favourite actor at that time, when I was a kid. Later, of course, I developed different tastes, if you like. But the early films, yes, James Cagney I thought was tremendous. And Orson Welles agrees with me, because he thought James Cagney was a wonderful actor. A truthful actor, which is more important.
And as a boy, did you have a pin-up of any glamorous actress on your wall?
Yes. I was madly in love with, who was it now? I'm trying to think. I can't remember. There was one, oh yes, Lana Turner. I was madly in love with Lana Turner. Of course, when I was about 12. I never met her, but I thought she was tremendous. Lana Turner. I remember all her films.
Was there an actual event or trigger that first prompted you to seriously consider acting as a profession, and how old were you at the time?
Absolutely. I was probably 13 years of age, maybe, I can't remember, or maybe 14, and I was in my dormitory. I was going to a preparatory school called Forest School in Snaresbrook, and we were going to bed, and I leapt on the bed and recited Henry V's speech before Harfleur, which starts, "Once more unto the breach, dear friends." And a master happened to be hearing it, the other side of the door, and opened the door and said, "My God, we have a budding Olivia here." True story.
Did you ever attend a stage school or audition, study or formally train to be an actor anywhere?
Yes, I was working in shipping when I was 21, but at night I used to go to a school called Parada, the Preparatory Academy of Dramatic Art, which I went to every night. I then emigrated to America for some time, and I couldn't get into the film industry. It was the height of McCarthyism, and they were going through a bad period, so I had a very difficult time in Los Angeles. And I came back, and my father asked me, having worked in several different trades, what I wanted to do with my life, and I said, I want to be an actor. And he said, all right, if you can get into RADA, he said, I'll give you a small allowance, you can stay at home, but you must get into RADA. I went on to RADA in 1953, and there were some terrific actors working with me, and I stayed there, but unfortunately I left before the end of the course due to family problems, and went immediately into repertory, the Bournemouth Repertory Company, the Palace Corps, with Harold Pinter, who was leading man, and other actors who I could tell you about, and Vivian Merchant, his wife, and I stayed there for 6 months. Yeah.
Either before you began your acting career, or maybe when you were between roles at any point in your career, outside of acting, what other jobs have you done?
Previous to acting, I was in the restaurant business for a period of time. I also was a beach photographer, and I was the ace beach photographer of England, actually. I took more money than any other beach photographer. I was known as Twinkle Toes Meadows on the West Pier of Brighton in 1948, and I was earning more money than my father. This was only during the summer, of course, and then, of course, I didn't want to go back to school because I made so much money. But I did that for a time. And then I went into the restaurant business, and I became the protege of one of the greatest restaurateurs in England at that time, a man called Rico Daju. And I went down and learned the kitchen. I worked in the kitchen. I worked as a waiter. I worked as a bartender. But I found the work terrible because night and day, I was all day long, all night. It was awful. I was starting at 10, finishing at 2 in the morning, that sort of thing, having a bit of sleep in the afternoon, and it was a nightmare. So I changed my profession and went into advertising. I worked for a company called the House of Ideas, which is one of the most successful advertising countries in England, and I was what they call an ideas man. But the boss, a year later, sacked me because he didn't like my ideas. So I got the boot, and I went into shipping, and I became a shipping canvasser looking for cargo for a company called Harris and Dixon in Gracechurch Street, and that was the job I was doing before I emigrated to America.
What was your first ever paid acting performance, i.e. your professional debut, and how old were you?
Right. I would have been about 23, maybe 24 probably, when I started at the Royal, I think it was called the Royal something, in Bournemouth, and my salary was £8 a week. I think for my accommodation called digs, was £4 a week, and the other £4 was for food and tobacco. It was a bit tricky, I must say, but I did it. And Harold Pinter, as I say, was leading man, who started writing, and Vivian Merchant, and a lovely actor called Alec Ross, who was married to Sheila Hancock, and he was a handsome, terrific actor. But he died in his 30s of cancer, which was a tragedy because Sheila Hancock, as you know, when she married John Thor, also died of cancer. But her first husband died at a very young age. He was a terrific actor. Great tragedy.
Can you remember how old you were or where you were working when someone first asked you for your autograph?
Well, as a matter of fact, I I got into a series. My first television real performance was in a play called The Last Enemy with Pete Murray, who used to do Radio Luxembourg, and he was a lovely actor, actually, a very good-looking fella. And it was called The Last Enemy, the story of Richard Hillary, an RAF hero. And I played a young German undergraduate who was at Oxford and was very proud of being a Nazi and insulted by English friends by telling them how inferior they were. I did rather well at that. And then the following day I got a phone call from Associated Rediffusion asking me to play a British hero in a series for Children's Hour called Captain Quest. And I was quite surprised, but I said to them, well, what did you see me in? And they said, we saw you play that Nazi chap last night. I said, are you casting me as a British hero, having seen me in a Nazi? And they said, yes, you're perfect casting, you're going to be great. And I was. Captain Quest. I did that for about 6 months on Children's Hour, and I shared Children's Hour with Charlie Drake in Mick and Montmorency, Jimmy Hanley in Jim's Inn, and Ralph Harris doing his painting. When I was doing Captain Quest, somebody asked me for my autograph, which, Children's Hour was very popular, and Captain Quest, who was a great hero, was loved by the public. He went all over the place, bars and everywhere in space, and my costume was a sports jacket, a sports tie, and smoking a pipe. And that was the costume that I was wearing when I was doing Captain Quest. Very authentic, wasn't it?
At any point in your life or your career, have you ever been starstruck when meeting someone famous? And have you ever asked anyone for their autograph?
Well, only when I was doing Coronation Street, which I didn't want to do, but they offered so much money I couldn't resist it. And I asked for the autographs of all the people who were working. It's 1963, the year that Kennedy was assassinated. And I asked them all, and I've got a book upstairs with all the autographs of the original cast of Coronation Street.
Throughout your career, were you ever one for collecting any memorabilia? And what, if anything, do you still have in your possession today?
No, I never collected any memorabilia with regard to my... only a few photographs, but never anything of importance, which I used during my filming or theatre or what I was doing professionally. No, I haven't got any memorabilia.
To perform in, what would you choose? Theatre, television, cinema or radio?
I'm often asked that question. Definitely theatre. It's a great thing for an actor to have a live audience, and you can feel if they love you or if they hate you. And yes, theatre was my main love, absolutely.
Which of your parts, performances or characters would you say people remember you for the most?
Well, I don't know. How could I know whether they remember me or not? I mean, I did get a lot of mail. When I was doing Coronation Street, of course, it had a huge audience. I was well known, and I did get a lot of mail. And when I went to the Cannes Film Festival, and I was looking at all, I only went there, not as a participant, but purely on tourist. And I was watching all the actors, Kirk Douglas, Cary Grant, all these people going up. And some women turned round, they looked away from the Hollywood stars, looked at me and said, it's him, it's Laurie Fraser, let's give him a kiss, let's get hold of him and take his clothes off.
So Coronation Street, you'd say, is probably the one?
Well, because of its popularity, of course. It had a colossal viewing audience at that time. I did a lot of serious work, but Coronation Street was very popular. But as I said, I only did it because they offered me a considerable amount of money.
So Stanley, whether it be for what you did on stage or screen, can you name any of your own individual performance or performances that you are personally the most proudest of?
Oh, well, yes. I mean, the thing I'm most proud of was my final play that I did before I retired. I retired because of it, actually. I played 6 or 7 different roles in a play called Kafka in Love, directed by Ron Moody. And I played all these different characters, and I got the most fabulous reviews from the critics, praising my performance, and I believe I was pretty good at it. And that was my, what do they call it, swan song. That was the last time I acted in a play in London.
Is there a part or a role that you still remember today that you auditioned for or really wanted but didn't get?
There must have been. I'm trying to think now. Actually, most of the parts I did get. I can't remember if there was a part I didn't get. Well, early on in my career, I mean, there was a part I wanted to play, or it was a film actually, and the actor who got it, and not me, was an actor called Peter Vaughan. Very good actor. I hope you've heard of him. And he got the part and I didn't. But you know, that happens. But very rarely I didn't get the part. Normally I did get the part. There was a part in Lionel Bart. It was a musical he'd written. I'm trying to think of the character. But I did a song called My Old Man's a Dustman. Which is a bit rude, actually, but I did that, and I thought I did it rather well. And then Lionel Bart got on the stage and said to me, now, this is the way you should have sung it. And he went ahead and sang My Old Man's a Dustman, and I didn't get the role. Neither did he, of course. He was the writer. But that was when I didn't get the role.
Was there ever an acting part that you had to turn down for whatever reason, but later regretted the decision?
Well, I was once asked to play God in a play. My wife can vouch for that. And I turned it down. I had no idea why they wanted me to play God. I mean, but they did. But I did regret later on that I didn't play God. I'd have been rather good, but there we are. It's one of those things. You remember when they asked me to play God?
Can you name a co-star that you liked working with the most?
Very much so.
And maybe, probably a little bit more controversial, but any that you had a tougher time working with?
Well, there are various actors that I loved and various actors I didn't love. But one particular actor I did love was John Gielgud. I found him the most wonderful person to work with, and a marvellous sense of humour. And on one occasion I was terrified because I was late on stage. I was playing his purse bearer in Henry VIII, and I was to lead all the processions onto stage, and I had to be early in the wings to lead them. And on one occasion, because I went to the loo, I was late, and I had to crawl under everybody's legs to get to the front of the crowd. And I thought, Sir John is going to give me a terrible telling off. And so I finally crawled under his legs and stood up, and he looked at me and he said, "Thank God, here comes our scrum half at last," which I thought was wonderful. He was a marvellous man.
So John Gielgud is one that you recall as one that you liked. But what about any that you disliked or you had a tough time with?
Well, I could not stand Derek Nimmo. I found he was so awful in his speech and his behaviour, and he really got on my nerves when I was doing this play for Patrick Dromgold. So he definitely is in my black book. I'm sorry he died, the way he died, of course, was terribly sad, falling downstairs, but I still must say I didn't like him.
Rather than asking you who your favourite director is or was, I'll ask it in a slightly different way. Outline what a director needs to do to get the best performance out of Stanley Meadows.
Well, you have to feel that he really likes you and that he thinks that you are a good actor. He has to give you that confidence that you can do anything. And there were two particular directors who loved my work, and I did some wonderful plays when I worked for them. One was called Philip Saville, and the other was Joan Kemp Welsh. And she adored me, and I did some marvellous work for her. You need to feel they love you, and they have confidence in what you could do.
Fantastic. So this is a left field one for you, Stanley. You are hosting an intimate dinner party and you're able to invite 3 other guests to attend. Other than your wife, of course, alive or dead, who would you choose to invite and why?
Very good. Peter Ustinov. I thought that man was wonderful. That humour, that comedy, and that intelligence, and tremendous, not only as an actor, as a person, as a writer. Jean Renoir, who I considered probably the greatest director that ever lived. I saw all his films, and I only wish I had the opportunity to just work for him in anything, but I never did, of course. But Jean Renoir. And the third person was a violinist that I saw. Oh no, I'm sorry, Peter Brook. Yes, Peter Brook. There was a stage director that I admired tremendously. Those 3, yes.
Fantastic. Fantastic 3 choices. If you could relive one moment from your career just one more time, what would you choose?
Relive? Well, you mean in my acting career? What I would do, I think, of a play that I did for Joan Kemp Welsh called The Problem of Girlfriends, where, she just thought I was the only actor in England to play that role. Basil the Razzle. And that was a great moment for me. And it was a great success, the play. And I loved doing it. And I loved working for her. Joan Kemp Welsh, memorable woman, wonderful.
Looking back over your career, do you have any regrets? If you had your time again, would you have done anything differently or made any different choices at any stage?
Well, many regrets. That I never had the opportunity of working with directors I admired. Perhaps I was being too ambitious. But I mean, people like Vittorio De Sica, who I thought was a wonderful director. Renoir, of course, I mentioned. I regretted that I never worked for those people, but there it is. I never can work, and of course they're all dead. But I do regret that I never had the opportunity of working for these people that I admired so much. And of course, Orson Welles, I knew. I was locked in a bar with him once, and I would love to have had him direct me as well. I thought he was what they call a flawed genius.
Tell us something about you or your career that most people would not already know.
Oh, well, I mean, my career was something, of course, I love doing. That is very much, you're so lucky if you're actually working at a job you love. And all I can say is that I loved acting. There were times when I was a bit disappointed in my performance, but overall I loved doing it, and I do miss it, but I'm glad I gave it up, because if I hadn't given it up, I certainly wouldn't be here talking to you today. All my friends are gone.
Is there any hobby or anything that you do? Is there something that,
No,
non-acting, that you could call out?
I haven't got any hobby whatsoever. I'm not interested particularly in sport. I'm very good at shopping. My wife's very happy about that. So, of course, I suppose that is my hobby, shopping and helping my wife in domestic working, what she does in the house. I try to help her as much as I can.
Perfect, and so you should. So the last question, Stanley, finish the sentence. Whatever happened to the actor Stanley Meadows?
Well, whatever happened to him was that when he retired, he was lucky enough to have sufficient funds to take his wife all round the world and to see how other people live. And he spent the next 5 years travelling as much as he could throughout most of the world. And that was the greatest pleasure I had. I'm too old now to do those long journeys, but I did have the opportunity of doing it when I was young enough and had the finance to be able to carry it out. I occupy myself today. My wife and I go a lot to the theatre. We love opera and we love classical music. And we're lucky to be in a part of London which has easy access to all those things. And we see everything that we think will be good, and that is how I occupy myself, still going to the theatre, music, etc. That's what I love. Plus the fact, by the way, I play bridge, which I also enjoy with my wife.